I never thought my parents would betray me in the one place I thought I was safe, the family business. But here I am, years later, still questioning whether I deserved it, or if they just decided my loyalty wasn't worth much compared to keeping my brother comfortable. For context, my parents ran a mid-sized company that had been in our family for 2 generations. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, gave us a comfortable life, and had a decent reputation in our town. From the time I was a teenager, I was working weekends there, stocking shelves, cleaning, running errands, whatever they needed. While my friends spent summers at the beach, I was in the warehouse sweating under flickering fluorescent lights. I didn't complain because I believed in the legacy. After college, I came back home instead of chasing opportunities elsewhere. I had a degree that could have landed me jobs in bigger cities, but my parents said, "We need you here. You'll run this company someday." So I listened. I worked 70-hour weeks. I built their first website from scratch. I found new clients when old ones started dropping off. I modernized processes that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Slowly, the company started doing better than it had in years. Meanwhile, my brother, let's call him Mark, barely lifted a finger. He technically had a management role, but everyone knew that meant he showed up late, disappeared for long lunches, and took credit for work he didn't do. Employees quietly came to me for real solutions because they knew Mark wouldn't handle it. Still, I never complained to my parents. I figured they had to see the difference. Surely they noticed who was actually keeping the business afloat. I told myself it didn't matter who got the recognition as long as the company thrived, because one day I'd be leading it officially. But then came the day that changed everything. I was called into my parents' office, a place I'd been in countless times before, except this time they weren't smiling. My mom's hands were folded. My dad's expression was stiff. Mark was already sitting there, smug like he'd just won something. My dad cleared his throat and said the words that still sting. "We're letting you go." At first, I thought it was a joke. I laughed, but their faces didn't change. My mom added softly, "We just can't afford to keep everyone right now. Mark is family, and we need to make sure he has stability. You're strong enough to land on your feet." I stared at them, stunned. Mark is family? I'm not. My dad sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "It's not personal. It's business. You'll understand one day." But it was personal. I had sacrificed everything, time, energy, my 20s, for that business. And now, because my brother was incompetent but needed stability, I was disposable. They gave me 2 weeks' notice and expected me to take it gracefully. That night, I packed up my desk while Mark smirked and patted my shoulder like I was some temp worker who hadn't made the cut. I drove home with tears blurring my vision, realizing for the first time that family loyalty only went one way in my household. And that was the last day I ever worked for my parents. Losing that job wasn't just about losing a paycheck. It was losing an identity I had built my entire adult life around. For years, I thought I was the future of the family business. Overnight, I was just nothing. The first few weeks were brutal. I had some savings, but not much, definitely not enough to sustain me for long without income. My rent was due, bills were piling up, and I had no idea what my next step would be. Worse, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my parents' office. Their calm faces, my brother's smug grin, the words, "It's just business." I tried applying for jobs in my field, but every rejection felt like a punch in the gut. My resume was heavily tied to my parents' company, and while I had real accomplishments, interviewers always asked why I left. I didn't have the heart to admit. My own parents fired me to protect my lazy brother. During that time, depression hit me hard. I'd spend days barely leaving my apartment, eating instant noodles, feeling like I had wasted the best years of my life. Friends tried to reach out, but I pushed them away. I felt ashamed, like I had failed at the one thing I was supposed to succeed at, carrying the family legacy. Ironically, the person who helped me most wasn't family at all. An old college friend, let's call him Chris, called me out of the blue. He had heard about what happened through mutual connections and said, "Listen, my company's small, but we're trying to expand. We could use someone with your skills. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." At first, I hesitated. Going from running big projects at my parents' business to starting at the bottom somewhere else felt humiliating. But Chris didn't treat me like damaged goods. He said, "I know what you did for that company. You're not the problem, they are. Come prove it." So I did. The new job wasn't easy. The company was small, underfunded, and struggling to survive against larger competitors, including, ironically, my parents' business. But that challenge lit a fire in me. Instead of being the kid working for mom and dad, I had to prove myself from scratch. I started with marketing, modernizing their website, running small ad campaigns, networking. The same things I had done before, but now my ideas actually mattered. Slowly, things improved. Sales picked up. New clients came in. My boss, Chris's business partner, noticed my work and started giving me more responsibility. For the first time in years, I wasn't just existing in someone else's shadow. I was being valued. Still, at night, I'd lie awake wondering about my parents. Did they miss me? Did they regret firing me? Or were they sitting around the dinner table congratulating Mark on keeping things running? I tried not to think about it, but deep down, I hoped they'd realize their mistake and call me back. But the call never came. Instead, I saw Facebook posts. My parents bragging about Mark, leading the family business into the future. Pictures of him at company events, smiling like he'd earned something. I wanted to scream. I wanted to comment, "That's my work you're showing off." But I didn't. I swallowed the bitterness and doubled down on building my new path. Because if my own family didn't see my worth, I was damn well going to prove it to the world. And little did I know that choice would eventually bring me back to their doorstep, except this time the roles would be reversed. Working at Chris's company started as survival, but it quickly became something else: redemption. For the first time, I wasn't the kid whose parents gave him a job. I wasn't living under anyone's shadow. Everything I did stood on its own, and every success was credited directly to me. The company itself wasn't much at first. It was a scrappy little competitor, often overlooked by bigger players like my parents' business. But what we lacked in resources, we made up for with creativity and hustle. I poured myself into it the way I had once poured myself into my family's company. I stayed late, worked weekends, brainstormed strategies, and wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty with the unglamorous stuff no one else wanted to touch. And it worked. Within a year, we started landing clients that normally would have gone straight to my parents' company. I knew exactly how they operated, how outdated their systems were, how rigid their pricing models were. I never badmouthed them. I didn't need to. All I had to do was offer better solutions. Clients noticed. Word spread. Slowly, my parents' once comfortable monopoly started slipping. I climbed the ranks quickly. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I became a leader. Chris trusted me completely, often saying, "You think like an owner." Eventually, he and his partner offered me a stake in the company. It wasn't much at first, but it meant something I'd never had before: real ownership. That moment felt like oxygen after years of suffocation. At my parents' business, I had been disposable. Here, I was indispensable. And with every deal we closed, every contract we signed, I felt more alive. But success came with a new twist: visibility. Competitors noticed us, including my parents' company. I'd see Mark at trade shows or industry events. He'd give me that same smug look, but there was always a flicker of something else now, maybe insecurity, maybe fear. The funny thing? I never wanted revenge. Not at first. I was too busy building something real. But every time I saw my parents' logo, or heard someone talk about the legacy of their family business, it reminded me of how they had tossed me aside like I didn't matter. That wound never fully closed. By year 3, our little company wasn't so little anymore. We were expanding into new regions, hiring more staff, and competing head-to-head with the big players. Investors were noticing us. For the first time, I wasn't just part of a company. I was helping lead one into real prominence. And then came the day I saw the first crack in my parents' empire. A former colleague from their company called me. She said things weren't going well. Clients were leaving, operations were a mess, and Mark was in way over his head. "Your brother doesn't know what he's doing," she whispered. "Your parents are stressed all the time. They act like everything's fine, but it's not. I should have felt pity, maybe even guilt, but instead, I felt something I couldn't name at the time. Not joy exactly, but a strange satisfaction. The business that had once been my entire life was unraveling, and I wasn't there to save it. I told myself it wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own company, my own team, my own future. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. Because if there's one thing about family, it's that they never stay gone for long, especially when they need something from you. News about my parents' business started trickling in slowly, like whispers carried by the wind. At first, it was little things, rumors at industry events, quiet comments from old clients. Your parents' company isn't what it used to be. Mark seems overwhelmed. They're slipping behind the times. I pretended I didn't care. Whenever someone brought it up, I'd shrug and change the subject. Outwardly, I was too busy with my own company to dwell on theirs. But inwardly, every rumor was like a spark on dry grass. My curiosity burned. The truth came into focus when an old supplier, someone I'd known since my teenage warehouse days, pulled me aside at a trade show. "Kid," he said, "I don't know what happened with you and your family, but they made a mistake letting you go. Things over there are a mess. Your brother's bleeding money on bad contracts. Your parents are arguing in front of employees. I give it a year before they're in serious trouble." I laughed it off in public, but my heart was pounding. For years, I had dreamed of my parents finally realizing what they had thrown away. Now it seemed that dream was becoming reality. The next time I saw Mark was at another industry mixer. He looked different, less smug, more tired. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes sunken. He still tried to puff out his chest when he spotted me, but his handshake was limp. "Still playing with the small leagues?" he sneered. I smiled. "Funny, some of your old clients don't seem to think so." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw the panic behind his bravado. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about how far things had shifted. 3 years ago, I was the one unemployed, humiliated, scraping by. Now I was thriving, and my family, the same people who said, "It's just business," were teetering on the edge. I'd love to say I felt nothing but satisfaction, but the truth was more complicated. There was a part of me that still longed for their approval, for some acknowledgement that I had mattered. I imagined my parents sitting at the dinner table, arguing about numbers, finally admitting, "Maybe we should have kept him." But another part of me, the harder, colder part, wanted them to feel every ounce of the betrayal I had felt. I wanted them to look at their sinking ship and remember the day they threw their best worker overboard to keep a lazy captain afloat. By year 4, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Their once polished reputation was stained by late deliveries, lost contracts, and unhappy clients. Meanwhile, my company was soaring. Investors were knocking at our door, and we had just secured a major partnership that put us firmly on the map. That's when the first call came. It was my mother. Her voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard since I was a kid. "Sweetheart," she said, "we need to talk. The business, it's not doing well. Your father and I could really use your expertise." For a moment, I almost laughed. My expertise? The same expertise they told me was disposable? I didn't give her an answer. I told her I was busy and would think about it. But when I hung up, my hands were shaking. This was the moment I had fantasized about for years. Their need, their desperation, their admission that I was the one who could save them. But the question was, would I? After my mom's first call, I thought maybe it was a one-off. Maybe she had been emotional, maybe things weren't that bad. But then came the second call, this time from my dad. And unlike my mom, he didn't bother sugarcoating. "Listen," he said bluntly. "The business isn't where it should be. We've lost a couple of major contracts. Cash flow is tight. Your brother is doing his best. But..." He trailed off, and I could almost hear him grinding his teeth. "We could use you back, even part-time, just until things stabilize." I sat there in stunned silence, phone pressed to my ear. For years, this man had acted like firing me was just business. He never apologized, never acknowledged the damage. And now, after throwing me out, He wanted me to swoop back in like the loyal son I had once been? I asked, "Why now? Why me?" There was a pause. Then he said, "Because you're good at what you do, and this is your family. Don't you care about the legacy?" The word legacy made my stomach twist. That legacy had chewed me up and spat me out, all so my brother could keep his cushy spot. I told him I'd think about it, which, to be fair, I did. For nights I lay awake wondering, was this my chance to heal things? Was I being too proud? Or was this the universe finally handing me the justice I had been denied? A week later, my brother called. Unlike my parents, he didn't bother pretending he respected me. His tone was dismissive, almost mocking. "Mom and Dad said you might come back," he said. "Honestly, I don't know if it's a good idea. You tend to overcomplicate things. But if you do come back, you'll need to follow my lead. I'm running things now." I nearly dropped the phone from laughing. His lead? The same guy who couldn't manage a lunch schedule, let alone a company? I told him flat out, "Mark, if I ever come back, it won't be under you." He snapped. "You think you're better than me? You always have. That's why Mom and Dad had to fire you. You never knew your place." That sentence hit me like a lightning bolt. So it had never been about money. Never about hard choices. It had always been about protecting his ego. My parents hadn't sacrificed me for the business. They'd sacrificed the business for him. And now they wanted me to clean up the mess? The calls kept coming. My mom pleading. My dad lecturing. My brother ranting. Each time, I felt a strange mix of anger and power. For once, I wasn't the desperate one. They were. Meanwhile, at my own company, things couldn't have been better. We had just closed a deal that would triple our revenue in the next year. My team was thriving. My name carried weight in the industry. I didn't need my parents' business anymore. But they desperately needed me. And that's when my partners came to me with a proposal that would change everything. "Why don't we just buy them out?" The idea hung in the air like thunder before a storm. I didn't answer right away. But deep down, I knew this was the fork in the road. I could be the dutiful son, rushing back to patch their sinking ship. Or I could be the businessman they had always told me to be, and make the deal that would end their reign for good. When my partners first floated the idea of buying out my parents' company, I laughed. Not because it was ridiculous, but because it was so ironic. Years ago, I had begged for a chance to lead that business. Now I was being asked if I wanted to own it outright. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Their company was hemorrhaging money, bleeding clients, and teetering on the edge of collapse. If someone else swooped in to acquire them, it could give a competitor the boost they desperately needed. But if we acquired them, it would solidify our position in the market and eliminate one of the last obstacles in our way. It wasn't just smart, it was strategic. I knew it wouldn't be easy. This wasn't just any acquisition. This was my family, my parents, my brother, the people who had tossed me aside. And yet, wasn't that exactly why it felt right? After a week of discussions, my partners formally authorized me to approach my parents with an offer. I still remember sitting across from them in their once bustling office. The place felt smaller now, dimmer, like the life had been drained from it. Stacks of unpaid invoices littered my dad's desk. My mom looked older, wearier. Mark sat slouched in his chair, pretending to be in control, though his tapping foot gave him away. I laid the papers on the desk and said, "We're prepared to acquire the company. You'll be compensated fairly. You can step back and retire with dignity. Employees will be taken care of. Clients will transition smoothly." My dad's face turned red instantly. "This is an insult. We built this from nothing. You think you can just waltz in here and take it?" I kept my voice calm. "It's not about me. It's about survival. You're running out of time and you know it." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "Sweetheart, why can't you just come back and help us? Why does it have to be this?" And then Mark, predictably, exploded. "You think you're some big shot now? You wouldn't even have a career if it weren't for Mom and Dad giving you a start. You owe them. You owe me." I turned to him, meeting his glare. I owed this family everything, and I paid it, with years of my life, with loyalty. With hard work you never did. That debt is settled. The silence that followed was heavy. Finally, my dad shoved the papers back across the desk. We'll never sell to you. I'd rather lose everything than hand it over to a traitor. I picked up the offer, tucked it back into my folder, and stood. That's your choice. But this is business. Remember? I gave him his own words back. It's not personal. I walked out of that office feeling both lighter and heavier than I ever had. Lighter because I had finally stood up for myself. Heavier because I knew the next time we spoke, it would be when their desperation outweighed their pride. And I was right. It took less than 6 months for the cracks to widen into full collapse. Clients left in droves. Suppliers cut them off. Rumors swirled that they couldn't make payroll. And then one night my phone rang again. It was my dad. His voice was hoarse, beaten down. Is the offer still on the table? When my dad finally called me back about the offer, I expected anger, but what I heard instead was something worse, defeat. His voice was hollow, like a man who had been fighting a battle too long and knew the war was already lost. Is the offer still on the table? He asked, almost choking on the words. I paused long enough to make him squirm. Yes, I said finally, but the terms have changed. That's the thing about business. Timing is everything. 6 months earlier, when I first walked into their office, they still had leverage. They could pretend they didn't need me. Now, with their reputation in ruins and creditors circling like vultures, the balance had shifted completely. We set up a formal meeting. My partners insisted on coming, but they let me take the lead. It was personal, after all. When I walked into that boardroom, the energy was palpable. My parents sat on one side, looking exhausted but clinging to dignity. Mark was there too, jittery, trying to project authority he didn't have. On my side sat my partners, polished and professional, representing the future. I laid out the revised offer. The purchase price was lower now, reflecting the company's decline, but it still gave my parents enough to retire comfortably. Employees would be retained where possible. Contracts would be honored. But the most important clause was this: Mark would have no management role. None. The room erupted. My mom gasped, "You can't do that. He's your brother." My dad slammed his fist on the table. "This is extortion." Mark shouted, "You're just jealous because I was chosen over you." I leaned forward, calm but firm. "This isn't about jealousy. It's about competence. Your mismanagement brought this company to the brink. If we're taking over, we're not dragging dead weight with us. This is the only deal you're getting." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mom's eyes brimmed with tears. My dad glared like he wanted to throw me out of the room, and Mark looked ready to leap across the table. But beneath all that, I saw something else: fear. They knew I was right. For days, they tried to negotiate. They begged, guilt-tripped, argued. My mom called me crying, saying, "This isn't who you are. You're better than this." My dad said, "Family comes first. How can you treat us like strangers?" Even Mark left me a drunken voicemail one night. "If you do this, you'll regret it. You'll be alone forever." Each time, I reminded myself of the day they fired me. The smug look on Mark's face. My dad saying, "It's not personal, it's business." I repeated those words like a mantra. In the end, they signed. They had no choice. The day the deal closed, I walked through the halls of the company I had once given everything to. Employees watched me with wide eyes, whispers following me like shadows. Some looked relieved. Others looked nervous. Mark didn't show up. My parents left early, unable to face the reality of handing me the keys. And me? I felt everything: triumph, bitterness, sadness, pride. I had finally taken control of the very empire that once discarded me. But instead of joy, all I felt was a gnawing emptiness. Because this wasn't just business. No matter how much I told myself otherwise, it was deeply, painfully personal. The ink was barely dry on the papers when the weight of it all hit me. The family business, my parents' pride, my childhood backdrop, my brother's safety net, was no longer theirs. It was mine. The takeover itself was clinical. Lawyers finalized the contracts. Bankers processed the transfer. Employees got the official email welcoming them to our company. From a business standpoint, it was smooth, efficient, almost routine. But for me, it was surreal. I walked the hallways I had once scrubbed as a teenager, now as the man in charge. Familiar faces looked at me with a mix of relief and suspicion. Relief because they knew I was competent. Suspicion because they also knew this was a hostile takeover in all but name. Mark disappeared the day the deal closed. He didn't show up at the office, didn't answer calls, didn't even pack up his things. One of his assistants later told me he stormed out cursing my name, vowing he'd start his own empire and crush me. Last I heard, he was unemployed, bouncing between side hustles that never stuck. My parents, though, were harder to face. They held a small farewell gathering for employees before handing over the keys. I wasn't invited, but of course I went. The sight of them standing in front of their staff, trying to hold back tears while thanking everyone for their years of service, was gut-wrenching. For the first time, they looked small. When they spotted me in the back of the room, my mom's voice faltered. My dad's jaw tightened. I half expected one of them to acknowledge me, maybe even thank me for keeping the company alive. But they didn't. To them, this wasn't salvation, it was betrayal. That night, I drove past their house. The lights were off, the blinds drawn. The home I'd grown up in looked like a fortress under siege. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, debating whether to knock on the door, to say something. But I didn't. Instead, I drove away, the silence heavier than any argument we'd ever had. In the weeks that followed, I tried to focus on the practical side of things. Transitioning employees, stabilizing client relationships, rebranding. On paper, everything was a success. Our company grew overnight, cementing our place as a major player in the industry. But behind closed doors, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Angry texts from my brother, emotional voicemails from my mom, cold, clipped emails from my dad. They all said the same thing in different ways. You destroyed us. You turned your back on your family. You chose money over blood. And that's what stung the most. Because no matter how many times I replayed the history, no matter how vividly I remembered being cast out in favor of my brother, I still felt guilty. I hadn't swung the axe, but I also hadn't stopped the tree from falling. One night, Chris pulled me aside. "You okay?" he asked. I shrugged. "We won. Isn't that enough?" He gave me a long look and said quietly, "Sometimes winning costs more than losing." I didn't answer, because deep down I knew he was right. The business was thriving. My career was soaring. But my family was in ruins. Once the takeover was complete, the fallout hit hard and fast. My parents, who once claimed I was the future of their company, now treated me like an enemy. Family dinners turned into accusatory phone calls. Every interaction was punctuated with guilt trips, silent stares, and thinly veiled resentment. My mom was the first to reach out again. "I don't know what happened to you," she said in a trembling voice one night. "I thought you cared about family. How could you let us fall apart like this?" I tried to explain. I reminded her how they fired me, how they chose my lazy brother over me, how I had poured years into their business only to be discarded. But my words fell flat. She didn't hear the facts. She only heard the hurt. To her, the narrative was simple. I had abandoned them. My dad's approach was colder. His emails were curt and filled with legal-sounding accusations. "You promised loyalty. You promised to uphold the family legacy. Instead, you orchestrated a hostile takeover and humiliated us in the process." Each line cut deeper than I expected, not because it was true, but because it felt like the final judgment of the people who raised me. And Mark, well, he was the most dramatic of all. He called me repeatedly, screaming into the phone, blaming me for ruining his life and destroying everything our parents worked for. I listened silently, letting him vent while a strange mixture of pity and frustration bubbled inside me. Pity because he had never earned anything on his own. Frustration because he refused to see that the mess was his doing too. Extended family got involved. Cousins and aunts sent passive-aggressive messages. Some called me heartless. Some said I owed them everything. I was accused of greed, betrayal, and cruelty, all while the memories of being fired replayed in my mind like a constant echo. One evening, after another exhausting call from my mom, I sat on my porch and just stared at the city skyline. I asked myself, am I the villain here? I hadn't stolen the company from them. I hadn't sabotaged it. All I did was refuse to save the people who had destroyed me and take an opportunity that was offered to me. But in the eyes of my family, I was the villain. Friends and colleagues offered support, reminding me that family doesn't automatically equal unconditional entitlement. Family is who you choose, Chris told me. You chose yourself, and that's okay. I nodded, but the hollow feeling in my chest didn't go away. I also struggled with my own reflection. Could I have handled this differently? Could I have found a way to save them without sacrificing myself? Maybe. But every scenario ended with me losing something fundamental: my respect, my dignity, my sense of fairness. And that's the thing about betrayal. It has a way of rewriting morality. My parents framed it as my choice to betray them, but I framed it as survival. Who's really in the wrong? Now, a year after the acquisition, my company thrives. My parents' old business is integrated seamlessly, and I've implemented the strategies I once wanted to bring to them years ago. Mark is nowhere near the executive floor, and my parents avoid any direct contact. And I feel like I won, but it's a hollow victory because the people I once loved most see me as the enemy. So here I am, 1 year after taking over my parents' business, and I still feel like I'm living in two separate worlds. On one side, there's my thriving company, my loyal employees, and my partners who trust me completely. On the other side, there's my family, the people who once promised me the future of their company, the people who fired me, the people who now accuse me of betrayal. I've tried to rationalize it. I remind myself that my parents made their choices long before I ever walked back into their offices. They chose my brother over me. They discarded my dedication, my sacrifices, and my years of hard work. Every time they try to guilt me, I remember the day they fired me, the way Mark smirked while I packed up my desk, the way they acted as if it was just business. And yet, the guilt lingers. Friends tell me I did the right thing. Chris tells me that loyalty is earned, and I had been loyal for years, only to be betrayed. Employees tell me I'm a capable leader, not a heartless child of entitled parents. But late at night, when the house is quiet and I replay the past, I still wonder, am I cruel? I could have gone back. I could have helped them, patched the holes, stabilized the company, and perhaps repaired some of the damage in our relationships. But at what cost? My time? My career? My self-respect? They didn't regret firing me, and they didn't see the pain they caused. I can't give them what they never acknowledged I earned. Instead, I let the business be bought by my own company. I ensured it survived, employees kept their jobs, and clients were served. But I also ensured that my parents and brother could no longer call the shots, could no longer claim control over what I had built with my own hands. Now they call me heartless. They say I destroyed them, that I prioritized money over blood, that I betrayed my family. And maybe, to them, that's true. But from where I stand, I didn't betray anyone. I simply refused to be exploited again. I keep asking myself, if my positions were reversed, would I have expected them to act differently? Would they have taken the opportunity to protect themselves and their future, or would they have stayed loyal at my expense? The answer seems painfully obvious. So, Reddit, here's the question. AITA for letting my parents' business collapse instead of saving it? I didn't sabotage it. I didn't steal it. I just refused to rescue the people who once discarded me. I honored the employees, I honored the clients, and I honored myself. But my parents, my brother, and some extended family see me as a villain. Am I the asshole for putting myself first after years of being cast aside? Or are they the ones who lost sight of loyalty, fairness, and the real meaning of family? Because I can't shake this feeling that sometimes survival isn't betrayal. It's the only way to protect yourself from the people who claim to love you.